In this short little video, I aim to respond to the most recent episode of the podcast, Jordan Klepper Fingers the Conspiracy Theory, with a little discussion about the nature and the origin of conspiracy theories themselves. So, the first thing that we need to cover or discuss is why conspiracy theories exist. We'll talk a bit about how they grow in Chapter 2 and what to do about them in Chapter 3. But let's get started with Chapter 1. Firstly, why do conspiracy theories exist? Simply put, it is human nature to create stories to explain events. We see these in the Greek mythology, stories about how volcanoes erupt, why they erupt. We see them in stories of Norse mythology about why does thunder happen, or why does it rain? Well, because that's obviously some deity urinating or what have you. We are, as beings, natural storytellers. People are also curious about the world around them. This sort of goes hand in hand with the idea of being natural storytellers. We make up stories to explain what we might necessarily lack the scientific knowledge to explain. One of the other things that figures into conspiracy theories is that people want a sense of belonging. They want to find others who believe in similar things to them. That's how these theories really get traction. People also, in general, want to feel that they are unique or special, or that they have special knowledge, unique information that other people don't have. People want also, sort of intrinsically, to believe that there is a logic or reason behind everything that happens in the world. This might be derived from other beliefs that people are taught to accept as children, but that they are sort of expected to grow out of. But some people do retain that. The final point that we want to mention about why conspiracy theories exist is that people tend to learn and retain only what they really specifically need to for their daily lives. This we can see in examples of people who might otherwise be very intelligent, or we might think of them as experts in a particular piece of software, like Microsoft Office. They can do anything with Microsoft Office that they need to. But when the company migrates to a new Office suite, this individual now seems to know absolutely nothing at all, because they've only retained what they absolutely need to for their job function. The chemistry, the biology, the physics that they learned in school, or the literature that they learned in school, is absolutely not essential, and the brain does not retain that information in any form. So, moving on, we do need to talk now about how conspiracy theories develop, as we've already given in broad strokes, obviously, demonstrations of how or why they exist. So, how do conspiracy theories start? Some event happens that people can't necessarily explain logically. It's something that we certainly saw in the latest podcast, where the one guest suggested that maybe Elon Musk, Mr. Musk, had some sort of overarching idea in some design on discrediting the notion of credibility in the media with all of the blue checkmark scandal. But anyway, we'll talk about that later. What we need to start off with is the broad strokes before we can get into specifics. The first thing is, let's assume something happens that is utterly unexpected in the news. When that happens, people search for an explanatory theory, or they are presented one by the news media. If people cannot find one, they will attempt to make up an explanatory theory, or they will incorporate it into something that they already believe. Be it, well, without getting into specifics here, it's not what we need to do at this point. The third thing that happens is that people will then take that theory, that hypothesis that they formed, and they will then look for evidence that supports that hypothesis or that theory. And then they move on from there, presenting that, sharing it with others, attempting to find others who believe in similar things, and if necessary, they will incorporate those beliefs into their theory, ultimately creating a grand unified conspiracy theory in their minds. What's an example? Let's take one example here of a conspiracy theory. The one that we've chosen to address is the moon landing, which happened in the first moon landing occurred on July the 20th, 1969. In this event, Edwin Buzz Aldrin and Neil A. Armstrong stepped onto the surface of the moon. They were the first human beings to do so. However, what is somewhat missed is that that one singular event came at the tail end of almost a decade of research in incrementalism. It's not, this is something of a fault in the media for not presenting the whole thing as a series, as the result of a bunch of different prior missions. It's presented as a sort of miraculous event that happened at once, and it was just three people, Michael Collins, Aldrin, and Armstrong, did this seemingly on their own. The fact that this started all with Mercury is somewhat forgotten. Speaking of things that were forgotten, another thing that is somewhat forgotten is that it wasn't just a couple of people. It wasn't just Aldrin, Collins, and Armstrong working in a proverbial shed that built the Saturn V rocket. NASA and the companies that built all of the components of the rocket were part of a massive team, a massive concerted effort of the United States to produce this one event. Another thing that is somewhat forgotten is that while the first moon landing was done the 20th of July, 1969, there were many other moon landings that followed on it. I believe, just going off the top of my head here, the last moon landing was in 1972 in Apollo 16. But those do not get the same coverage as the first time. Obviously, the first time is the big major event. And that contributes to how the conspiracy theory grew. A lack of information, a lack of awareness that there were follow-on events. It's only that first one that tends to get remembered. But we're getting ahead of ourselves here. Only a little bit, though. So, why not believe that the first moon landing happened in 1969? It was seemingly an unexpected event, as we said in Chapter 1. An unexpected event happened. People tried to come up with an explanation for why it happened. It was something that a fair amount of people didn't understand the complicated chemistry that went into rocket engines. They didn't maybe necessarily understand the physics of escape velocity and translunar injection and trajectories and all the rest of the complicated physics that went into it. Finally, and this is probably the biggest reason that that some individuals don't necessarily believe that the moon landing happened, is that landing on the moon had existed in film and television for a very long time before it actually happened, which, for some individuals, presented an alternate theory of how that could be done, and an alternate view of what the moon would actually look like. It wasn't very long before it actually happened in 1966 that the movie 2001 showed people a very realistic, or very seemingly realistic, image of what the lunar surface would look like. And it wasn't just that film, it was television series like Star Trek, Battlestar Galactica, and all of the various B movies, science fiction, that showed people what the moon might look like. And when people saw the first images of the actual moon, they looked so indistinguishable from the images that science fiction and television movies had shown them that seemed possible, or plausible, rather, that what they were seeing was actually a television production, rather than the actual moon. And this is going to get back to that idea of not understanding the physics and the chemistry and everything that went along with it, and not seeing the whole chain of history that led up to the lunar landing. Moving right along, though, as much as we'd love to talk about that, we do need to get on to Chapter 3. And Chapter 3 is, very briefly again, what there is to do about conspiracy theories. First off, and this is absolutely very important to remember, there is no such thing as a silver bullet, in the sense that there is no one phrase, no one piece of information that will get anyone who believes a conspiracy theory to say, oh, of course, I've been wrong for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, however long it was. And that they will suddenly realize, oh, of course, my conspiracy theory is all wrong, you're right, fantastic, thank you, I'm saved, or whatever reaction that we're expecting, I'm not sure. How we address that belief depends on the theory that we are attempting to explain, or offer an alternate explanation for. Something that we should absolutely not do is dismiss these individuals as fools, lunatics, or idiots, and we do need to educate them as much as we possibly can on the reality of what happened, with the chemistry, with the physics. Show them examples, get them invested in with experimentalism. Again, the sort of way that we would when we were little kids. And with all of that, we can address one theory, one belief at a time. And on that note, I really hope, although I don't expect that this will ever be seen by anyone, but at least I've offered a plausible theory for how these exist, and a better answer than I think I got from that particular podcast. So, thanks for watching if you did. Goodbye.